Welcome to the Nairobi Health Show, everybody. I'm here today with Julie Michelson. Julie, thanks for coming on the show.
So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you. It's a very important topic. Julie is an expert in autoimmune diseases, and she helps high achievers to function well in their lives, even with difficult health conditions. And so, Julie, I'm going to ask you your story. First of all, I'm going to read kind of a bio that I semi-created based on your website and information. So if there's anything that I got wrong, you can correct me. But for those of you listening, Julie helps high achievers struggling with inflammation take their power back from autoimmunity, putting them in control of their symptoms, their health, and their well-being. She was in her early 30s when she began struggling with symptoms of autoimmunity as a single mother of two. So I'd like to ask you more questions about that. It was three. So, okay, great correction, important correction. But you can imagine being a single mother and having an autoimmune disease. And as she figured this out, she realized she discovered things that were important for other people as well. And of course, many people need to hear this message and understand. There's many people, Julie, living with frustration who go from expert to expert to expert. And you were one of those. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to think if we were doing it over, I'd be a little quicker to try to find my own answers. I did the conventional medicine route because I didn't really know there were other options, at least effective options. And so I continued to decline for over a decade and, was told I had no other option. The best possible outcome was a slower decline. And I believed that.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and these days I still hear it. I hear it over and over and over. And I know the wonderful doctors that were treating me at the time were doing, the best they could. It's not like they knew what to do and were holding out on me, right? Like that was their training.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so I was on 10 prescriptions at the end of that 11 years and couldn't work, I had to quit grad school. I had to rest when my kids were in school so I could be a mom when they hopped out of school. Just to get them, I would do the morning and then I would do the afternoon and evening and couldn't wait to get them to bed. And so grateful that I finally realized maybe I haven't tried everything. My daughter had come to me, she's my youngest, and said, please don't die and leave us. And I thought, oh my gosh, my kids, I thought that was going to happen, but to know that my kids were, laying awake at night, worrying about the same thing. At that point, I was in my 40s. Didn't think I'd live to see 50. I am about to turn 53, depending on when this airs. It'll be right around that. When you
Can I stop you there for 1 second? I know you're midstream here, and I want to hear more. But I want to stop at this point to just at this point. Was there a lot of misdiagnosis? Were you being diagnosed and given names of things that you had that ended up being wrong, or what was happening medically at this time?
Yeah. Almost astoundingly, I was accurately diagnosed. I used to say I was one of the lucky ones. It can sometimes take up to 8 years for somebody with autoimmunity to get a diagnosis. I kind of wish we wouldn't even look for one now because we can get stuck in things. I was properly diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis first, then found out I had celiac. Then I ended up with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Then I had fibromyalgia. And it was a snowball that so many people with autoimmunity fall into, where they're just accumulating over the years diagnoses. None of them were actually incorrect. But the treatment approach was to treat symptoms. It was never to find out, why is this happening? And let's fix that problem, which is luckily what I eventually was able to do, and why I'm so passionate about helping others do the same.
Wow. And so from that point, you have accurate diagnosis. You're going through the real symptoms of these situations. You're going to the experts that you can afford and that are in your reach and your availability and in the healthcare system that you're part of.
Yeah.
Great insurance, doing all that. And then that epiphany that you had when your daughter said that,
Mhm.
it sounds like before that, you're kind of accepting, oh, this is what I
Totally.
have. This is
Yep.
where, I deal with this the best I
Yep.
can. And then she said that, and you had that epiphany, and then what?
Well, so for me, obviously, I couldn't tell her I wasn't gonna die and leave her, right? None of us can ever say that.
Right.
But what I realized in that moment was that I had only tried that one approach. I hadn't, and so all I could promise her was I will try everything that I can, which seems in hindsight like, oh my gosh, well, why didn't I say that, 11, 12 years earlier? But again, it was just, that's what I needed. And that was the timing. Luckily, also, there were more options readily available. There were things like podcasts, right? I could start listening and learning, and that was really what I did. I didn't jump right into, let me find a functional medicine doctor. I still hadn't even heard of functional medicine.
Hmm.
And so for me, luckily, the first step was, well, I had already taken the first step. I hadn't realized it. When my son was diagnosed with celiac, I went gluten-free to support him, not knowing that I too had celiac, and
Okay.
noticed
Okay.
a little bit of an improvement in my symptoms. And so when I made that commitment to her that I would try everything, that was where, it made sense to, okay, let's start with food. If that moved the needle a little bit, what else can I do? And that
Interesting.
became the gateway for me, that eventually led to what I do now.
There's so much to talk about, and everything you're saying, it brings up so many interesting topics, right? As part of our human condition. As I was getting my health certification from Precision Nutrition, and I chose Precision Nutrition very intentionally because health certifications range from,
Mhm.
one weekend workshops where you have a
Yes.
certification to very, very difficult certifications like Precision Nutrition. And I wanted a really good one. I wanted one that was
Yeah.
hard, that would be really challenging. And so I had taken the Precision Nutrition course as a student. And I loved, the 1 year program. And I thought, well, I'm ready to be a coach, so I'm going to do that one because I'm so happy with it.
Sure.
And they talked about some of these things. For example, I've tried everything. You know how many people say, I've tried everything? I've been overweight 40 pounds for 20 years. I've
Mhm.
tried
My whole
everything.
life. Yeah.
And they teach you as a coach, to just to not necessarily be in their face or be mean or anything like that, of
Right.
course. Um, but when you simply repeat it back, oh, you've tried everything.
Right.
and
Yeah.
and
Oh,
and it's right.
and
But
it's
we often feel that way. I often feel
true.
that
We've
way.
tried everything we know how
I've
to
tried.
try, right? Is
Yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
what yeah. Yeah.
But somehow, somewhere, we need someone, or we have to have that epiphany ourselves. No, we haven't tried everything. And
Yeah.
and then another issue that your story brings up that I think is worth pointing out. I
Mhm.
loved how you framed the discussion with the professionals and doctors. Of course, they're excellent people. They're well trained. They did 13 years of study, and guess what? In 13 years of study, you know this much about
Right.
health and wellness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
True
the best
wellness.
they can do,
Yeah.
and so it's so
And I always
interesting.
say, if I need surgery, God forbid I have an acute issue, I am going to a Western trained physician who, I'm not going to take a vitamin if I need surgery. That's not the answer. But this, which I still hold the belief, more so and more so until I pull my head out of the bubble and see the line at McDonald's, that we're moving toward a true wellness model where, I mean, there's so much chronic illness in this country, and that approach doesn't work for chronic illness. It doesn't have to be autoimmunity. And that's why I mentioned inflammation in my bio, right? So many people have, whether it's,
Good
heart
point.
disease, diabetes, it doesn't matter. Again, that's where I work with people. I work with a great local functional medicine clinic here. And I say, my business is focused on autoimmunity. Those are my clients in the wild, but I work with all kinds of patients there. It's the same approach. It's all the same approach, whether we want to stop cancer growing or we want to correct blood sugar, we want to get the cardiac markers better. It's all the same. It's all inflammation.
Okay. And for you, the epiphany started when your son was diagnosed with celiac. You start eating the way that he was advised to eat,
Yep.
and you start to notice improvement.
Yeah, my pain was noticeably better. It wasn't maybe clinically significantly better, but when you're taking 10 or 11 prescriptions that seem to do nothing, and you notice that change seemed to make a difference, it's eye-opening.
So I want to cut to the chase dietarily then. So obviously with nutrition being the catalyst for change for you, where did you arrive? You know, is it one of the named diets? Was it like Mediterranean style? Was it vegan? I mean, could you describe to us where you finally landed that worked for you?
Absolutely. And I will reiterate, this is what worked for me at the time. I don't believe there's one way for everybody. I get that all the time. Well, just tell me what you eat and I'll be great. And I'm like, no. For me, the tremendous change, I always say, you know, when I made this decision, I was already paleo, but I was doing it wrong. So
okay,
I was kind of a low fat, still eating lots of sugar paleo, you know, doing all the baking and all the, and so definitely better than my gluten-full diet at the time. It was, for me personally, I tripped across Dave Asprey and I read his Bulletproof Diet book and got myself, and it was hard to do keto. I grew up low fat. My dad passed at 54 of a heart attack, you know, so just to consume even good quality fats just felt strange. And for me was the missing link. That was, my body was clearly deprived of healthy fats for decades. And so a very restricted landing, you know, intermittent fasting was big for me. Keto, you know, definitely paleo. For me personally, I do best with no grains at all. And then some food sensitivities in there, typical for kind of autoimmune and nightshade sensitive. I remember at first few years, I wasn't eating grains. I kept saying, well, thank goodness I can tolerate dairy just fine, because my family was in the dairy business and I love cheese. And I only, you know, I didn't have a coach. I didn't have guidance. I was just trying to figure it out. So I never did any kind of elimination diets properly at the time. And I can tell you now, I don't actually tolerate dairy well now that I know what to look for.
Interesting. And so how long did this process take before you kind of dialed in the key to your own nutritional lock?
Nutritionally, I mean, honestly, probably years, you know, tinkering and toying and experimenting. And again, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just trying. And for me, I'm so fortunate as far as underlying causes for chronic inflammation go. You know, diet's only one component, but I was fortunate to get the needle to move enough where my brain fog was better and I could retain thought and learn. And, you know, I was hungry for more and my energy was better. Some people will do all the right things, but, you know, if they have a toxicity issue or their stress is totally through the roof, or, you know, all these other drivers aren't being handled, they may be eating exactly the right thing for themselves and still not feeling well.
And so let's move on to those other things then. So you got, you know, nutrition was important. It was the beginning of the process. What was next that was really important?
Stress management, or, you know, it wasn't even, I didn't know it. But luckily I finally began a really committed meditation practice. And boy, did that move the needle. I mean,
how long ago was that?
That was 6 years ago.
Okay, that's really interesting. I have had a daily meditation practice for 6 years also.
Oh, wow.
I started in February 2016.
Okay.
I dabbled with it before.
Me too.
Okay.
And And did you have this? I'm a bad meditator. I hear that all the time. And that's how I felt. Like I had a misconception of what it meant to meditate. And so I would kind of start and then I'd be like, I'm not good at this. I can't keep my mind clear. It's not for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I find that with almost everyone I talk to, and I've learned my
Yep.
lesson. When I ask people about meditation, I always ask them what they think meditation is, because
Yes.
the definitions of meditation are all over the map.
Yeah.
My own was really synced up to the concept of enlightenment, and that there's a goal of you know, this is an exaggeration, but of if not angels coming out and singing and your life being permanently changed, something close, that if you meditated long enough, you know, and that at the very least you'd gain control over your thoughts, right? That was another one. Like, oh yeah, good meditators, they probably sit there and their mind is blank and they're sitting in this bliss.
Yes.
And
no.
yeah.
But yeah, I get it.
So tell us about that, because you deal with this, you teach people this. And so, but to your point, I really was a bad meditator. I will tell you that. Even by the current definitions I have, I couldn't go more than about 3 minutes for a long, long time. I mean, my ability to just sit and meditate, it took me a long, long time. And so I currently do a 20-minute a day plan, quite simple. And my plan is based on meditating, not to become a good meditator, but to be more mindful in the rest of my life, to take the mindfulness practice from my 20 minutes into the rest of my life, to celebrate when I bring myself back to mindfulness versus criticize every time I find my mind wandering.
Yes.
Those types of principles are what I've kind of arrived at. A goalless practice in a lot of ways. I'm not seeking enlightenment. I'm not seeking to become monk-like in my abilities or become superhuman in any way.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I love that. I mean, unless you are a monk, you know, and that is your goal, is to go live in a cave, we meditate to get better at life. We don't, you know, the goal isn't to get better at meditation. And I would say, even if you were doing 3 minutes, if you were doing it consistently, then you were a good meditator. And so at some point you were doing it consistently because you've expanded.
I think it took me over a year. I don't remember exactly, because I didn't journal this or anything like that, but I think it was about a year of 3 to 5 minutes. And then finally I got the Waking Up app by Sam Harris. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sam Harris, but I just like his style. I mean, I've used them all. I started with Headspace. There's a bunch in Insight Timer. I like David G. I like Jack Kornfield. I like Tara Brach. There's a bunch of teachers that I really enjoy. Joseph Goldstein. I've got a list of teachers that I can sit and listen to at any time and really enjoy. But the style of meditation, it's kind of a modernized Dzogchen that I would describe Sam Harris's as. And that seems to be the one that resonates best with me. And I did that. I did that for 10 minutes.
Misnomer. You know, one's better than the other. I'm like, whatever resonates that you'll do is the best one.
Good point. Well, I've said enough about it. So over to you. I think this conversation is great to kind of flesh it out, but I want to turn it back to you and tell us your experience with it. Where did you start with meditation?
So again, much like you know, beyond the whole dabbling and thinking, I was making my shopping list and like, that I failed. I can't do this. I, as the universe is very kind, tripped across Emily Fletcher and Ziva meditation 6 years ago, heard her on a podcast. And this was the first time I heard this concept of like, wait a minute, it's the exercise of meditating. It's an exercise. It's not an end goal. And her program, at least back at the time, was very much just do it. Like, it doesn't matter. You know, I tell people all the time, you are going to be hitting your to-do list at some point. It's that act of returning. And that was the greatest gift I received from, first I had done her online program and then did some retreats with her to dig deeper. And that was another And it wasn't one thing and then another. I was working on diet and I added this in, but I will say for me, so her program when I started it was 20 minutes twice a day, which was a big
Okay.
investment in time and
Hmm.
commitment. And within, I would say 2 weeks, my sleep improved, my energy improved, and my pain improved. And it was like,
Okay. Wow.
it's reinforcing, right? When we can feel the change. And I joke because I like to think I've always been patient and kind and happy and mellow. And my daughter, she's always like, why do you always talk about me on the podcast? She was in high school at the time. And if I missed that afternoon meditation more than one day in a row, she would say to me, just gently, hey, mom, why don't I drive and you meditate while, while we're on our way to wherever, where we're going. She could notice the difference. And I always say for me, aside from, so how do I convince somebody who isn't struggling with pain and sleep and energy? And if you're not someone who's just looking for the up level, it's that better human thing, right? Like you said, it's for me, it allows me to create the pause. Am I enlightened? No, not yet, not totally. But it allows me to respond instead of react and be mindful and intentional about how I live my life.
I love that. And I haven't heard of that teacher. What's her name again?
Her name is Emily Fletcher. And she has her program is Ziva Meditation, Ziva. It's fantastic. It's just because it was so accessible. And again, every different things are going to resonate for different people. But she has an online course that will get somebody really up and running.
Terrific. And does she do meditations all over, or just in your local area? Or I'm sorry, the retreats?
She well, in 2016 she was doing them all over. I'm honestly not sure right now
Right.
with how weird things have been what she's doing. She's based in New York, and so she does
Okay.
have a national or international community at this point. And she has a great book out to stress less, accomplish more. Came out a few years
Oh,
ago. And again, because it's meditation for life, not for meditation's sake, which was something that resonated with me. I since have dabbled. I play with all different kinds of meditations because I'm experimental.
yeah. Interesting. For me, it started with a local Buddhist Sangha. I've got a son who, as a teenager, he's gay, and when he was 14 and 15, that was really tough for him. He
Mhm.
didn't know who he was and what was going on, and he was frustrated with us as parents,
Sure.
me more than my wife. I was trying to connect with him, and I didn't know,
Yeah.
what was wrong, and we just weren't connecting. But inside, he was going through a lot of inner turmoil. That he was different than other people, and it was
Sure.
really hard for him. And and one day we were getting ready for church, and he's like, "I'm not going." And
Mm,
there was kind of a big blow up.
sure.
Especially my wife was very upset about it, and um, and what happened is I end up saying, "Look, you don't have to go to this church, but as your parents, a big part of our job is to help you develop your moral compass. And if it's not going to be at church, like it was for me and your mom,
Sure.
it's going to be somewhere. And so if you think, we're not going to let you just stay home and play Xbox while we go to church, right?
Right.
So I said, is there something you would like to do? I know you really enjoy yoga he had a high school teacher who taught yoga, and he would go to her class and she told all the kids about yoga, and he'd go there and he really enjoyed that. And anyways, he ended up finding a Buddhist meditation Sangha close to our house, hour and a half session. And I ended up going to that with him.
Hmm. Sure.
And and from there, that's where I really started to learn a lot more about it. It was hugely healing and transforming for him.
Good.
Yeah, and it was really, really amazing. As a matter of fact, one of the very first weeks we were there, they have a little session at the end where people can share stories. And there was a man who's in a local orchestra who's gay and being discriminated against a
Mm.
little bit. Nothing really serious, just annoying, is the way he described it. And he talked about how his practice had helped him deal with this with compassion, with love for these people, and at a very high level. And he shared his story. And my son just was transfixed, and he just listened with wide eyes, and going from the angry, discovering who he was phase to hearing this man in a very mature, mindful, meditative way talk about how his practice was helping him to deal with discriminating people in a loving, kind, mindful way I think it was a turning point in his life, to be honest. It was a big deal.
Wow, that is so beautiful. I literally had goosebumps. That is our job as parents, but it can often be so hard to do when one of our kids needs a different direction for themselves. And so I just commend you for encouraging him to find whatever his something is, right? And then the beauty of it ends up also being a gift for you, because not only is it helping him and your relationship, but you've been meditating for 6 years. So that's amazing.
Yeah. And to your point, that nutrition isn't the answer to everything. Of course, we're talking autoimmune as the major topic here.
Yeah,
And
but
you're talking about how nutrition isn't the only thing. And just like in my story, that was a healing event.
Sure.
And healing is not just a physical thing. And I think that might be part of your story too, right? Is that
Oh, absolutely.
that healing doesn't just come from what we put in our mouths, but what we're absorbing through all media, through what we
Everything.
see, who we're with our entire life. So meditation was huge for you.
Yeah.
And continues to be.
Continues to be. Absolutely. Yeah.
So what else? What were some of the other key building blocks in your new fancy home of health?
In my new fancy home of health. Well, so at this point in my story, Dave Asprey and what was then the Bulletproof Coach Institute he created a coaching program. And as I said, my brain was working and I had energy, and I couldn't believe, like, wow, the body can heal. And so I took that coach training program, and that was what exposed me to, which was, biohacking based. Anybody who knows Dave or Bulletproof but I learned a lot about functional medicine. I learned a lot about whole health and the body's ability to heal, and just how important, a lot of the stuff that I might have thought was woo-woo was so science-based and so real, and bringing all of that together. And so that journey led me to continue digging. I found a functional medicine practitioner. For me, just like so many other people, my toxin load was a huge player, a huge trigger for my autoimmunity, which is why I say I'm so blessed that I was able to get well without even knowing that, or well enough. I always say I feel fully well, but I know, like, every 6 months I look over my shoulder and I feel even better than I did. So I just continued to up level. I feel younger in my 50s than I did in my 30s.
So when you're eating so well and doing all these correct things, how did you figure out that your toxins were still really high? And that must have been surprising. I think most people listening would assume that if you're eating really well and you've made a lot of improvements, that your toxicity level would come in line.
Yeah. Again, for me, some of it was fortunate that I have this kind of experimental, as I learn things. And so for me, this was in my coach training and learning about toxins and heavy metals. And I just am that person where it's worth investing in the test. I'm curious, right? So my curiosity has led me to, find out more and more and more. I actually talk about eating clean and being surprised. So I knew I originally did I had lived in South Florida, so I did a mold and mycotoxin panel. I knew I'd had a bunch of dental work replaced, so I did a heavy metals panel and was able to identify I had my mercury was off the chart.
Oh, wow.
I had lead toxicity, which took me a while to figure out. And it was actually off of these beautiful plates that had been handed down to me that we were eating off of every day that had lead in the paints.
Oh my. Wow.
And I've been
Wow.
working on these things. I'm that person, I have an infrared sauna. I do all the things I've been addressing both with medical supervision and a little on my own beforehand. And recently I was like, I want to retest, but I've never, now that I work in this field, and obviously the knowledge I had even 5 years ago, 4 years ago, I have so much more. I see what I see in my practice. I like to then check on myself, or, I see a lot of this and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to retest. Again, I feel great. No real need to retest my toxin panels, but I have one that I love running on people it's metals, it's molds, and it's also environmental toxins. And so I did
All in
that
one
one
test?
myself. Yeah, all in one test, which was great.
Okay.
Did it on myself and could not believe I've been eating organic since it's been a thing, right? Like I've been eating organic. I don't use plastics. Been living this way for years. All of that stuff is still through the roof with me, just because genetically I joke, I'm a collector.
Okay.
But my glyphosate levels are through the roof. How?
Really?
It's wild. I'm not a big person. You can see me. Not everybody can, but I'm a fairly tiny gal. And
Okay.
so, yes, we store toxins in our fat, and that doesn't mean we have to be fat to be storing toxins. So it's a process. So for me, I'm always looking for that up level, which is why I love working with high achievers. That's why my practice is geared, because we don't need an autoimmune diagnosis to feel like we're tired when we wake up in the morning, or our brain just isn't working the way it used to. Those
Yeah.
things that we say, oh, I'm getting older. It's all inflammation.
So we could go on forever. I mean,
Yes.
obviously we can only get so much knowledge out of one guest in one podcast. And so, before I let you go here, we will have you share how people can get a hold of you, especially if they're suffering
Sure.
some of these symptoms. But to just do kind of a summary, and I do this carefully because, of course, it is a summary, and we don't,
Sure.
but it's still useful, right? So,
Sure.
in summary, what would you say are maybe the top 5 kind of areas that people need to tackle to
Yes.
move the needle on their health if they're dealing with these conditions?
I would say number one is nutrition. And I'm saying number one, it's not no particular order, all
Okay.
very important.
Yeah.
Nutrition, dedicated, as in regular daily stress management practice of some sort. Toxins, looking at and it doesn't necessarily mean like me, where you have it's what are you using on, in, around your body, what's in your home. The things that, sometimes we just need to reduce the input, and it's that simple. Movement, finding the appropriate movement level, because I work with high achievers, often they're over exercising and creating chronic inflammation that way.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then sleep. Everybody needs to just totally optimize their sleep, and that may not mean what they think it does.
Fascinating, and totally in line with all the science that many of my other guests are talking about. It's so interesting. The last 5 years of health science have come a
Mhm.
long way, and there's things we didn't used to talk about. Sleep is one of them. Now everyone's talking about it, right? Everyone's talking about
Yes.
morning routines and now sleep rituals. And
Yes.
all of
Well,
these
they get
things
better.
are things. Yeah, we're finding that, it's one big circle. It's just one kind of big circle, but we're learning that some of the things we used to think were important really aren't that important. Some of the things we
Right.
used to think were a good diet aren't a great diet.
Sure.
I totally resonate with what you say about exercising too much. I've been there.
Me too.
I've been that person that was doing, 15 hours a week of training,
Yep.
and I know what adrenal fatigue is. you know, I didn't know it till I'd had it a
Right.
while. You know what I
Not at the
mean?
time. Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know. So all these things really resonate with me. Um, and of course, some people listening probably just need to talk to you. They probably need a coach,
Sure. Sure.
right? So how do people get a hold of you? And is that what you do, Julie? You are now a coach and
That
helping people through these issues.
Yep, that is what I do. It is my passion to just partner. I work very high contact with my clients and support them and guide them and partner with them to make these changes. It's a lot. It's always a lot. Um, Everybody doesn't need to start in the same place, right? So it's getting that
Right.
feel for, okay, where do we get the bang for the buck so we can get that needle moving and create the energy to do more. Um, so I have a coaching business. I have programs. I have a podcast that I'd love to have you come on, which is called Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. And again, it serves everybody.
I
You
would
don't
love
have
to
to
do
have a
that.
diagnosis. Yeah, it'll be
That'd be
fun. We can
fun.
continue the conversation. The
Yeah.
easiest place to find me is jm.coach. That'll take you straight
Okay.
to, instant to social, to my website, to my programs, to the podcast, wherever you want to go. So I like to keep it simple. I do the same with my coaching. Simple's good. Simple works.
Well, fantastic. Julie, there's one more question I want to ask you. And this
Yes.
one is kind of out of left field. And I should have prepared you for it before, but I'm going to dump it on you anyway, because I know
Go
you're
for
a person who doesn't mind a challenge. So
it.
we'll see how you fare with this one. But um, differently from any of the stories you've told us so far, right? Or
Mhm,
in addition to what you've already told us,
mhm.
I've found that many people have had epiphanies in their life, and you shared a couple with them, where somebody shared something with them that really was an aha moment. Maybe it was a book, experience like your daughter pointing out that you're kind of
Yeah.
on your way to dying and she wanted you to stick around and be grandma, those
Yep.
sort of things. I wonder if there's another one more epiphany where another person or event or podcast or something has made a huge impact on your life, where you were different after that, where you went to a higher level because of what someone else did or said or wrote. Do you have another story
Oh,
like that you'd share with us?
oh my. um, There's so many, and I know from listening to your podcast, we're similar in that way where, I always say if somebody gets a nugget, right? And there's been so many, and a nugget sounds small, but they can be life-changing. Um,
Yes.
if you'll allow me, I'm going to shift gears. It's not a book or a person. It is something that most of us have heard over and over and over and probably never paid attention to,
Okay.
that is my grand epiphany and is my purpose in life, I believe, which is really spreading the knowledge that the body is designed to heal. That it's not about finding that right anything or fixing. It's about what's blocking the body from healing. And it's that simple. And so I can give you, 25 different places where I heard it and probably didn't hear it when I heard it. um,
Right. But
and
somehow, some way you picked that up, and that has been life-changing for
I
you.
think I think for me, obviously I had no idea, or I would have been on my healing journey sooner. For me, that reinforcement has come from years of watching it happen over and over and over and over again, and watching symptoms and struggles that I knew could improve, but you never know how much, right? We're all different. And what was that going to look
Yeah.
like? If I had come to me, and said, I want to get off, people do that all the time too. I want to get off all my medications like you did. And I'm like, that was never my goal. I wanted to feel well. My doctors took the
Right.
medications away because they didn't need them.
Right.
I would have never thought that there's any way that this person who needed, they were trying to get me to put a handicap placard on my car. I now live on 10 acres with horses. I went scuba diving last month. There's no way I
I
wouldn't
love
believe
it.
you. So there is no limit is really this is how these bodies are created. They are created to heal.
Well, that's a great closing thought. I'm so glad I asked you that question.
I know I didn't answer it, but I wanted to, it came up. I was like, I want to share. I want everybody to know.
That was a great answer. No, it really was. And so thank you so much for sharing that. You've got my email. Just send me
Yes.
instructions on how to be on your podcast. I'd be honored to be on your podcast.
Wonderful.
Let's do that. My assistant, Mickey, will send you a coupon code for $100 off anything at Dairobi.com. Not a $100 voucher, so you can buy some stuff at our website. So
fun, because I love
look for that.
Dabbling and playing. So that's good.
The products I think you really like,
Yes.
maybe even more for your clients than yourself, but I, of course,
Sure.
would love to have you try them anyway.
Very aligned. Yeah.
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. Our philosophies are aligned, and what you're doing is fantastic. And I hope someone listening out there is really resonating and thinking, oh, Julie is the person I need to talk to about my issues. So
reach out. I love meeting people and just seeing, if you're inspired to take one step, then I say job well done. So thank you. Thank you for having me, Dave.
Thank you so much. And for those of you listening, this is Dave Sherwin wishing you health and success.